For the remainder of this unit, we will lecture on the subject of Advanced Care Directives, a very important topic. This is applicable to chaplains in every setting, but especially in clinical ones. As chaplains, we are called often to help people who are dealing with challenging circumstances and have to make difficult decisions during a storm. Helping people to communicate their wishes regarding treatment options if they were to become unable to make them themselves can be challenging. What you learn in this module is extremely important to your work as a chaplain, and I encourage you to put some effort into this subject. To help people make advanced care decisions, you must understand the process and make these difficult decisions yourself. How can you help others if you don't understand the challenges firsthand? And so you are required to work on your own advanced care directives, and you will help each other in the class as part of a project in discussing advanced care directives and helping each other through the process. Essentially, you're going to serve as a chaplain to each other while each of you work with your loved ones to communicate your own wishes if a life-threatening situation became your reality. In this series, you will learn several things. Number one, why these documents should be completed and how they were developed. Number two, healthcare advanced directives, what they are, how they work. Number three is how to conduct meaningful conversations about a client or patient's values and wishes. Number four is how to communicate the how, the who, and the what of healthcare values and wishes. And finally, number five is how to complete or assist someone in completing healthcare advanced directives. You can find most state-specific documents at www.caringinfo.org. Be sure to open that site in your browser, search for your state, and download the appropriate document for you to engage with personally. And you will help other students in the class complete their advanced care directives as well as you work together. It will aid much in your learning of what these documents are all about. You will experience firsthand the struggle that exists in making some of these important and often difficult decisions. If you already have an advanced care directive in place, you don't have to create a new one. However, you will need to participate with the group in helping others create one. And you should find and download your current state-approved document and compare it to what you already have in place if you have one. Consider, should it be updated? Now be prepared to discuss your observations about completing the document on yourself during our final week of class in week 12. So what struggles did you have? What decisions were difficult? How did this help you relate to someone else? And how did the exercise make you feel about making these decisions yourself? Each person has the right to make their own decisions about treatment care, and far too often their condition doesn't allow them to communicate their wishes. Perhaps they're no longer competent, or maybe they're in a coma. So before that happens, it starts with talking about what matters and communicating their wishes. Most people feel it's important to have these conversations, but few ever actually do so. One of the strengths of chaplaincy is in our ability to give people the encouragement to talk about things that nobody wants to talk about. We create relationship, a safe space, and a listening ear while asking important questions to give people the chance to talk these important things out. Advanced care planning is an important step toward receiving medical care that meets long-term needs and preferences. Discussing these things with your loved ones will ensure that you receive the best care that is right for you, no matter where life may take you. And more importantly, if your wishes are communicated in written advanced care directives, someone else cannot override your decisions. According to the PDF document that's included in your reading for this week, it's called Advanced Care Planning, Ensuring Your Wishes Are Met. Only about a third of people implement advanced care directives. The reasons stated for not engaging these important documents include things like lack of awareness. So many people have just never thought about it. And denial. It won't happen to me. or confusion. People have no idea how to address this issue, so they ignore it. Cultural differences, too. Some cultures believe it's bad juju to talk about dying. So it all begins with conversations, so that people can talk about important things. And isn't that what we chaplains do best? We start by discussing the options, and then you start making important decisions and create a plan. And finally, you communicate your decisions through a specific direction, legal document that explains your choices. At every step in this process, the chaplain will play an important role, which we want you to learn how to do. Some research has suggested that doctors report struggles with conducting effective end-of-life conversations with all of their patients, and especially with those whose ethnicity or beliefs or culture is different from their own. So it's vital to identify strategies to mitigate barriers that doctors encounter in conducting effective end-of-life conversations with people who are seriously ill and also their families. As chaplains who have demonstrated expertise in both communication and religion, we can and should contribute to solving the dilemma that's faced by doctors in this area. When we show up and help patients make these important decisions, it will endear us to the doctors who universally struggle with end-of-life conversations that they must have with people. But when should a person create advanced care directives? Well, the answer is a simple one. If you can tell me when you are going to die, or when you might be unable to make decisions for yourself, then I can tell you exactly when to create your advanced care directive. But in truth, you cannot answer that question. So the time to create one is now, before it is ever needed, and hopefully it never will be needed. The history of advanced care directives points to a legal document that was known as a living will, and that emerged in the 1960s. The goal of that document was to give people the ability to make their own decisions with the expectation that their wishes will be followed, while delegating authority to someone else to act on their behalf and implement their wishes. Generally speaking, living wills are out of date and are not used as frequently as in the past. They've been replaced with more extensive and more clearly written legal documents that do a much better job. Some states, however, still do use living wills. You'll need to find out what your state does. Current legal wisdom suggests the use of durable power of attorney for healthcare and advanced care directives, and that term, durable power, it means that the authority to act extends beyond a person's incapacity to act for themselves. A typical power of attorney given to any third party is automatically revoked upon death, disability, or an incapacity of the one who gave it. So that word durable means specifically that the power continues beyond any of those things. It's usually effective when one or more doctors agree that the person doesn't have the ability to make their own decisions at this time. The key act on this matter was passed by Congress and became effective in 1991. It was called the Patient Self-Determination Act, the right of any person to decide their own fate, their own treatment, and their own medical decisions. Well, it's always been a right under the Constitution, but the problem is extending that right to them beyond their capacity to communicate informed decisions on their own wasn't formally recognized until this act was passed. So it paved the way for modern legal documents to express a patient's desire to give authority for advanced care directives to someone else. Some very disturbing and difficult reading landmark medical ethics cases paved the way for legislation that actually works. It was generally considered logical and ethical to allow for advanced care directives to have legal authority over government or institutional interventions. But sadly, it took some very devastating circumstances to spur the development and acceptance of legal documents that actually can be enforced. The Terry Schiavo case was a series of court and legislative actions in the United States that took place from 1998 to 2005 regarding the care of Teresa Marie Schiavo, a woman in an irreversible, persistent vegetative state. Schiavo's husband and legal guardian argued that Schiavo would not want prolonged artificial life support without the prospect of recovery, and in 1998 he elected to remove her feeding tube. But Schiavo's parents disputed her husband's assertions and challenged Schiavo's medical diagnosis, arguing in favor of continuing artificial nutrition and hydration, keeping her alive. The highly publicized and prolonged series of legal challenges presented by her parents, which ultimately involved state and federal politicians, all the way up to the level of President George W. Bush. And it caused a 7-year delay before Schiavo's feeding tube was ultimately removed. Another, Karen Ann Quinlan, was an American woman who became an important figure in the history of the right to die controversy in the United States. When she was 21 years old, Quinlan became unconscious after she consumed Valium along with alcohol while on a crash diet, and she lapsed into a coma, followed by a persistent vegetative state. After doctors, under threat from prosecutors, refused the request of her parents, Joseph and Julia Quinlan, to disconnect Quinlan's ventilator, which the parents believed constituted extraordinary means of prolonging her life, her parents filed suit to disconnect Quinlan from that ventilator. Quinlan's case continues to raise important questions in morality, theology, bioethics, legal guardianship, euthanasia, and civil rights. Her case has affected the practice of medicine and law all around the world. A significant outcome of her case was the development of formal ethics committees in hospitals, nursing homes, and hospice care facilities. I've actually served on several. Another landmark case began after January 11, 1983, when 25-year-old Nancy Cruzan lost her control of her car while driving at night near Carthage, Missouri. She was thrown from the vehicle and landed face down in a water-filled ditch. Paramedics found her with no vital signs, but they resuscitated her. After 3 weeks in a coma, she was diagnosed as being in a persistent vegetative state. Surgeons inserted a feeding tube for her long-term care. In 1988, Cruzan's parents asked her doctors to remove her feeding tube, but the hospital refused to do so without a court order, since removal of the tube would actually cause Cruzan's death. The Cruzans won in court, but the state of Missouri appealed the decision, and this went all the way to the Supreme Court. Cruzan versus Director of the Missouri Department of Health was a landmark decision. It became the very first right-to-die case ever heard by the Supreme Court, and in a 5-4 decision, the court affirmed the earlier ruling of the Supreme Court of Missouri and ruled in favor of the state of Missouri, finding it was acceptable to require clear and convincing evidence of a patient's wishes for removal of life support. A significant outcome of this case was the creation of advanced care directives. Cases like Terry Schiavo, Karen Ann Quinlan, and Nancy Cruzan are difficult to read. They are so sad, and yet, in a way, we can be very thankful for their contribution to a legal system that works now. If only people would put the necessary documents in place before they're needed. Because of the importance of these documents and the need for you to become familiar with them, you yourself should create advanced care directives. And this is going to be a very valuable exercise for you and your loved ones to process through the difficult conversations of values and wishes that will influence what your decisions and what your preferences might be. Understanding that from yourself will be very helpful to helping others process through these challenging conversations.